Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're having a wonderful week like always. I'm continuing with my Grace Jones discography journey, and we made it to her third studio album from 1979 called Muse. Now, from my understanding, this is the final album in her disco trilogy that started with her first album, Portfolio, in 1977, and then her second album, Fame, and now Muse, her third album. So this will be the end of the disco trilogy from the 70s, and then after Muse, apparently is when things get really good with her fourth studio album called Warm Leatherette. So that's going to be a really exciting album to listen to for the first time to see where she goes after Muse heading into the 80s. So that's going to be really exciting. But in today's video, we do have to listen to Muse. Looking at the track list, there are 8 tracks, and I don't recall hearing any of these songs before. The album is 43 minutes. But like always, if I start listening to a song and it sounds familiar, I'll let you guys know. But enough talking, let's get into some disco dancing with track number 1, Sitting. Alrighty, that was track number 1, Sitting. Sitting indeed. I mean, I need to go to church after listening to this song. Take me to church, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I love it. I love the lyrics in particular. Sitting every day, cussing all the way. Rather be a bitch, just look at me. Being a witch is what I'd rather be. You just make me mad. I'll let you see what I'd rather be. What I'd rather be, bad as I can be. She also says, yes, I'm a witch. It's no fantasy. You're stuck with me. No one or evil on this earth to be found. The first minute or so of the song, I didn't really know what to make of it, but as the song progressed, I really started enjoying it. And then by the end, I fell in love with it. So I think this is a great opening track, and I think it's great. What I also liked about the song was the very end with the cackling. I thought it was a nice touch. There's also an interesting theme with the titles of the tracks. Track number 1, Sitting, and then track number 2, Suffer, and then Repentance, Forgive Me, and then track number 4, Saved. So now let's move on to track number 2, Suffer.
Take that.
Ooh.
Take that. I didn't know I was only having fun with me. I didn't say you did your dirt, you did your wrong. Now, yeah. And that.
Yes, track number 2, Suffer. I was not suffering at all as I was listening to that song. I was in love. I loved it. It was great. It says here that there was only one single from the album, and that was On Your Knees, but this should have been a single. It's great. It's definitely one of my favorite songs from her first 3 albums, and I'm only 2 tracks into this album, and I'm already loving it. I absolutely love the production on this track. It was great. And what I wasn't expecting was the male vocalist on the track, which was a nice surprise. I like the contrast between the 2 voices, the deeper male vocalist and also Grace's voice as well. So now let's move on to track number 3, Repentance, Forgive Me. Alrighty, that was track number 3, Repentance, Forgive Me, and this was another great song. I don't like it as much as the first 2 tracks, Sedate and Suffer, but I still really enjoyed it. The production is great. This is definitely a much darker album than her first 2, and the tone of it is much different, and I'm here for it. I feel like this album might be my favorite so far out of the 3. I haven't listened to the whole album yet, but it's on track to be my favorite out of her first 3 disco albums. Looking inside myself, I'm so ashamed. Can I be saved? Realized that time is passing. Stay with me. It's all I'm asking. God. It's God. It's God. It's God. Everything that I own, it's God. So I really do enjoy the story that she is sharing with us on this album. She's going from track number 1, Sitting, and saying how she's a witch and she's a bitch and she's bad. And then in track number 2, she's suffering, suffer. And now track number 3, repentance, forgive me. So I like the transition here between each of the tracks. And so we're going to continue with this story now in track number 4, Saved. Alrighty, that was track number 4, Saved, and I'm exhausted. I'm kind of pooped out, I'm not gonna lie. I'm having a lot of fun, and this track was quite long. It was just over 7 minutes, which I didn't mind. It's just, I'm a little exhausted now, and we still have 4 more tracks to go, but I had a lot of fun, and I'm really enjoyed this album. She says here, saved, I'm alone, but you briefly. You can see I'm just a simple girl. Saved, I don't pray for the presence of a normal world. I don't know if it's just me, but there's also something very mature about this album compared to her other 2 albums, Fame and Portfolio. I'm just really liking the lyrics on this album. I am curious to know how old she was when she put out this album. Grace Jones was 31 years old when this album came out. She was born in 1948. That's really interesting. I thought she was a lot younger. I thought maybe she was in her early to mid 20s. But anyway, let's move on to track number 5, Atlantic City Gambler. Alrighty, that was track number 5, Atlantic City Gambler, and I really liked her vocals on this track in particular. She says, Atlantic City Gambler is my name, seeking out my fortune and my fame. Atlantic City Gambling is my game. When I make a deal, you know I play for real. When I roll the dice, you gotta pay the price. It's interesting because when I type in Atlantic City into Google, the first question that pops up is Atlantic City dangerous? I've heard of Atlantic City before, but I've never actually looked into what the city was about. And it says here that it was established in the 1800s as a health resort. Today, the city is dotted with glitzy high-rise hotels and nightclubs. In addition to gambling at slot machines and table games, the casinos offer spa treatments, performances by famous comedy and music acts, and high-end shopping. I mean, it does kind of remind me of Las Vegas. She does sing about sitting in track number 1, and for whatever reason, I always thought gambling was a sin. It's just, I don't know, I remember hearing that throughout my life. I don't know where I recall hearing it, but I always thought the Bible said that gambling was a sin, so I actually had to look into it. Yes, we're going there. It says that, I don't know, so it says here that it never specifically says in the Bible that gambling is a sin, but it does warn us to stay away from the love of money. So leave a comment if you've ever been to Atlantic City before. What was that like? Maybe you've been to Atlantic City and Vegas. And how do they compare? How are they different? Which one do you prefer? I've always wanted to go to Las Vegas. I mean, it's definitely on my bucket list of places to go before I die. I have been to my local casino a few times. When my cousins are in town, we usually go. And I have played the slots before. I don't know, gambling isn't really for me. I don't really play the card games or blackjack or what have you. But I do like the slot machines, and when I do go to the casino, I usually bring $20 with me, and I end up losing it. I think the most I've ever gambled away is $20 at a casino. I don't know, gambling isn't really for me, but I think it's a lot of fun to try once in a while. So I'm also gonna ask you another question. If you've ever been to a casino, how much do you typically spend? How much have you spent? How much have you won or lost? I mean, I've heard horror stories of the amount of money people lose at casinos. Well, that was quite the rabbit hole we fell down, wasn't it? Anyway, let's move on to track number 6. I'll Find My Way to You. Alrighty, that was track number 6, I'll Find My Way to You, and I wasn't the biggest fan of this song. It's probably my least favorite on the album. I just didn't find it that interesting. It does sound a little generic and boring, in my opinion. It's not very memorable. I mean, I already forget what it sounds like. Other than that, I don't really have much to say about the song, so let's move on to track number 7, Don't Mess with the Messer. He was a good worker. Okay, and that was track number 7, Don't Mess with the Messer. I love the lyrics in this song so much. Johnny, now you're all trapped in my honeycomb. You should have known better, Leaving Queen Bee alone. Don't mess with the messer. I ate sugar, I ate spice. I'm laid everything all nice. I can be as cold as ice. And then she goes on to say, Johnny, now you're the honey trapped in my tree. You should have known better. Should have known better messing with love's queen bee. This poor Johnny. I will say, I am also getting Black Widow vibes from Grace Jones as well. Well, hello, you're Johnny's friend, aren't you? He sent me to see you. He was a good worker for this queen bee. I also really enjoyed the flute in this song. I think it was a flute about halfway through, and it was really nice to hear. So we have come to the end of the album. Track number 8, On Your Knees. Get down on your knees, baby. And that was track number 9, On Your Knees. This was great. She is so fierce, not just on this song, but the entire album. This was another song where I really enjoyed the lyrics and her voice. Her voice is so sassy and so, I can't even explain it. I just really like her vocals on this album and the lyrics and the production. Overall, I really enjoyed myself. I can see why this was the lead single off the album. Like I said before, there was only one single off the album, and it was this one. And I really liked it. It was a great way to wrap up the album. Time has come for you to cater to the things that I may need. Time to get down on your knees. Time to beg. Time to crawl. Time to plead. Time to get down on your knees. I definitely feel like the lyrics on this album are some of her most daring when it comes to her first 3 albums, and a little bit provocative compared to her first 2 albums, and she's a bit wild on this album, I won't lie, and I love it. You definitely don't want to be on Grace Jones's bad side, I imagine, because she will come after you, and she will, I think she'll fuck you up. Her first 3 albums are very consistent: Portfolio, Fame, and now Muse. And you can definitely hear the growth with each album. And I really enjoyed her 3rd album. I feel like it might be my favorite out of the 3. I don't know. I have to go back to her prior 2 albums, but Muse is definitely my first or second favorite album out of her 3 first albums. It was darker in tone when it came to her lyrics and her singing as well, the stories in the songs that she was sharing with us. It says here that Muse was released in the year of the anti-disco backlash, and both the album and its double A-side single, On Your Knees, Don't Mess with the Messer, and Saved were largely overlooked by the record-buying public at the time, and is generally believed to be Grace Jones's lost album. I am curious to know what this anti-disco backlash was. It says here that in 1979 to 1980, there was a "disco sucks" slogan, and disco started to decline in popularity. By the end of the 1970s, anti-disco sentiment developed among rock music fans and musicians, particularly in the United States. Disco was criticized as mindless, consumerist, overproduced, and escapist. Rock artists such as Rod Stewart and David Bowie, who added disco elements to their music, were accused of selling out. It says here that July 12, 1979 became known as the day disco died because of the Disco Demolition Night, an anti-disco demonstration in a baseball doubleheader at Comiskey Park in Chicago. So from what I'm reading here, it looks like disgruntled rock fans were a major contributor to the decline of disco music. On July 21st, 1979, the top 6 records on the US music charts were disco songs. But by September 22nd, there were no disco songs in the US top 10 chart. Some people in the media, in celebratory tones, declared disco dead and rock revived. But some people have stated that disco was probably on its way out anyway at the time, but the Disco Demolition Night hastened the demise of disco music. I mean, I could keep going on and on and on in regards to what happened during this time. There are paragraphs worth of information. I'm just so fascinated by this movement. It says here that in the years since the Disco Demolition Night, some social critics have described the Disco Sucks movement as implicitly macho and bigoted, and an attack on non-white and non-heterosexual cultures. Some critics have also argued that homophobia and most likely racism were reasons behind the movement as well. I mean, there are so many critics and people giving their own opinions as to what happened during this time and the downfall of disco music. There's so many different theories as to why this actually took place. So if you were around during this time, the late 1970s to early 1980s, what was this movement like and what was the music landscape like back then. But it's really nice to see that over the last 30 years that disco music has been making a comeback from so many notable artists over the last 30 years, from Daft Punk to Kylie Minogue to Madonna to so many pop artists, just reviving the genre. Michael Jackson also, Bruno Mars, and even Beyonce and Katy Perry. So many artists reviving disco music. And when I think of today's music, I can't help but think of Kylie Minogue, who has been heavily influenced by disco music. You only have to listen to her whole catalog of albums to know how influenced by disco she really was. I mean, she's putting out an album called Disco. Literally in a couple weeks, this coming November, she's putting out an album called Disco. So, you know what? Disco has not died. Disco will keep living on through the years and the decades and the generations. Nobody will ever be able to kill disco. So that was another interesting rabbit hole I fell down. I've been falling down a lot of rabbit holes during this video. I really do apologize, but I'm just a very curious person by nature, and I love finding out new things about essentially anything. So officially, I think that's all I wanted to say on Muse by Grace Jones from 1979. What did you guys think of the album? Which songs from the album are your favorites? And in my next Grace Jones video, I'm so excited because we'll be moving on to her fourth studio album from 1980 called Warm Leatherette. So look out for that video, and thanks for watching, guys. You can find me on Instagram, you can find me on Twitter, you can message me, you can tell me other artists I should check out. I'm open to any artists from any decade. You can find me on Apple Music, you can check out my playlist, and so on and so forth. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care.